Advocate Today, I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist. A new report from the CDC says roughly 1 in 5 high school students in the U.S. has witnessed violence firsthand in their communities. The CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance System monitors health-related behaviors among high school students. The report describes community violence as a significant public health concern. In 2021, over 3% of high schoolers carried a gun in the last year. 29% of black students reported witnessing community violence compared to 24% of white students. And 27% of LGBTQ+ students reported witnessing community violence compared to 18% of heterosexual students. Witnessing violence was found to make teens more likely to carry a gun, engage in substance use, and perpetuate violence. The Congressional Gun Violence Prevention Task Force is pushing for more effort in gun violence legislation. It's a bipartisan group of lawmakers looking for common-sense solutions to reduce gun violence. It formed in the aftermath of the Sandy Hook shooting. It has 180 members, and now they are joining with doctors in calling for Congress to pass new legislation to fix the nation's glaring gun problem.
Gun violence is the #1 cause of death in children in this country. Think about that. More kids die from gunfire than anything else in this country. And what do we get? Thoughts and prayers. Excuses. Political posturing that ensures a troubled individual with destructive thoughts can go and buy a weapon of war at a moment's notice.
Much more needs to be done. In a country that has 4% of the world's population, but more than 40% of the world's guns. And many of those guns fall into the hands of individuals who are determined to exact violence on innocent children and Americans. And more can be done. Many of those guns are weapons of war that are not used to hunt deer. They're used to hunt human beings and shred children.
The Gun Violence Prevention Task Force played a leadership role in passing the Safer Communities Act to fund the background checks program and more gun violence prevention research. Meanwhile, Colorado Governor Jared Polis has signed 4 gun control bills into law. This comes just months after the deadly Club Q shooting in Colorado Springs. The bills are aimed at reducing gun violence and increasing public safety. Among the provisions, they set a minimum 3-day waiting period before the delivery of a purchased firearm, and it removes a liability protection for firearm and ammunition manufacturers. The age requirement of knowingly possessing a gun will go from 18 years old to 21 years old. The state will expand its existing red flag law, allowing more people to petition for an extreme risk protection order. The governor says the measures are important steps in making Colorado one of the 10 safest states. Let's bring in Advocate Digital Director Alex Cooper for more on what these new bills mean for gun safety. Colorado has a long history of gun violence, and Club Q being one of the more recent and focused ones. Would you talk a little bit about that history, and to what extent did Club Q play into the passing of these laws?
Mm-hmm. So, Colorado has a turbulent history when it comes to shootings, right? You have all the way back to Columbine in 1999, to Aurora in 2012, up until Club Q, which happened in November. So what you really have is this history of gun violence in the state, and Club Q, like you said, it's been 5 months since the massacre at Club Q, and that was one of the reasons that gun advocates in the state pushed for these changes. Mm-hmm. Up until recently, with one of these laws, for instance, plaintiffs would have to pay gun industry legal fees if their case was dismissed. That's no longer the case with the signing of these bills into law. So Club Q was definitely one of the factors in passing this legislation, and then also one of the factors in having in Governor Polis signing them.
Mhm. And would you share a little bit about what Governor Polis said about signing these bills and why it was important to him?
Yeah, I mean, he made it very clear that, you know, people in the state shouldn't have to fear going to a movie theater or going to a club, that these are dangers that could be, decreased substantially. And that's what these laws aim to do. And specifically, not only just gun violence, as in like targeted attacks, but also to decrease risk of suicide,
Mm.
specifically the 3-day waiting period. Um, the motivation behind that one specifically was to decrease heat of the moment situations when it comes to suicide risk or violence.
Mhm. Yes, and Colorado has a kind of an outsized number of deaths by suicide. And would you talk a little bit about how, a little deeper into how that figures into some of these decisions?
Yeah, so the state itself actually is the has a sixth highest suicide rate. And again, going back to the 3-day waiting period, that's definitely behind it. It's also one of the motivations behind the red flag law expansion. So previously in the state, the law only allowed family members or police law enforcement to intervene when they thought someone could be pose a threat. They could go to a judge and request an emergency order that law enforcement could then temporarily seize an individual's firearms. With this new law, that's expanded to medical professionals, teachers, and others who can now intervene. So if an individual is at risk for suicide, then more people could intervene potentially um, in that situation.
Great. Thank you. And would you talk a little bit about how the vote over these bills broke down and what Republicans are saying?
Yeah, so the vote was pretty much along party lines. Some Democrats did side with Republicans when it came to passing these laws. There has already been some pushback when it comes to lawsuits against a couple of these laws. And then gun advocacy groups have said they're planning to continue um, to pursue legal challenges.
And what has the general reception been in the public regarding these laws?
I mean, there seems to be massive support, especially from Democrats, gun rights groups. Even um, when it was signed on Friday, there were advocates flanking the governor. When it was signed, people wearing moms or sorry, a gun advocacy group, Moms of Man Action,
Mhm.
as well as families of victims of gun violence.
Great. Well, Alex Cooper, Digital Director of The Advocate, thank you so much for being here with me today. I appreciate your information.
Thank you.
The Trevor Project is releasing its national survey of LGBTQ plus young people. This year's report explores the negative impact of anti-LGBTQ plus policies and victimization. The report presents alarming statistics. 41% of LGBTQ plus young people seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. Those who were physically threatened or harmed because of their identity reported triple the rate of suicide. But there is some positive news to report. LGBTQ plus young people who had access to affirming homes, schools, and communities reported lower rates of attempting suicide. And trans and non-binary young people reported lower rates of attempting suicide when their peers respect their pronouns and have access to a gender-neutral bathroom at school. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, call the new 988 hotline. It provides immediate help and resources for those in need of it. Again, the number is 988. Thank you for joining me on this Advocate today. We are advocating for all. Visit us wherever you stream or online at advocatechannel.com. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist, and I'll see you next time.